So, have you ever been tripped up? Ever tripped over anything? Maybe you missed that step coming in the door at night. Maybe the cat suddenly got underneath your feet. Maybe it was Legos all over the floor. Maybe it was one of those imaginary cracks in the sidewalk that you went over this week, that just tripped you up. My guess is, though, probably not a lot of us have been tripped up on sausage. Probably not, right? There's a story from years ago that reportedly came from the St. Petersburg Times that there was a thief that broke into a meat market, and in the middle of his smash and grab, he grabbed what he thought was a couple of sausages. Well, it ended up not being a couple of sausages. It ended up being some linked sausages. And not just 3 or 4, but 45 feet of linked sausages. Yeah. The alarm system must have been really good. It went off quickly. The police got there very quickly, and they found the thief on the floor of the meat market, completely tangled up in all of that sausage. Man, kind of like a good brat, sausage crimes are the worst. That had that random punch, right? Sometimes in life, though, we don't get tripped up over Legos and we don't get tripped up over sausage. We get tripped up over discouragement, right? And not just that back-to-school discouragement that comes, but deeper discouragement. The kind of discouragement that creates a sense of despondency, disillusionment, and even some depression. Is there any help when we get tripped up with that kind of discouragement? Yes, there is. We begin a new kind of mini-series in Hebrews 12. It's called Look Here. And what we're going to do in looking at Hebrews 12 is we're actually going to find some of the greatest help that exists anywhere for our moments of discouragement. The kind of help that will be good no matter what kind of discouragement we are facing. The kind of help that will be good no matter where we are, no matter what's going on, no matter what year it may be. That sounds like pretty good help. So what is that help? Well, let's find out together. Today's message is Look Here to Run. And we're going to begin with Hebrews 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we also have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us. That therefore is there for a reason, and the reason is this is chapter 12, and right before this in chapter 11, we have this description, a description of people who had been loving and following God for 2,000 plus years. So don't miss this scene. So 2,000 plus years before Hebrews was written, there were people loving and following God. Now it's been another 2,000 years. So we're talking about 4,000 plus years of people loving and following the God of the Bible, the one true God. Chapter 12 is a picture of what was happening in chapter 11. It is oftentimes, chapter 11, called the Hall of Faith because it's stories of believers and their walk with the Lord. Have you ever been to a Hall of Fame kind of place? Maybe a museum type thing, a Hall of Fame place. It's usually a building or maybe a room somewhere, and inside that room there are, statues of people's heads, or there's paintings, or there's pictures, or their names are put somewhere on a plaques, and it's, these great athletes, or great politicians, or great educators, or great actors, or whatever it may be, great robots. There's a robot Hall of Fame in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yeah. If you're there, go check it out. And what it does is, when we're sitting in a room like that, we sense this sense of nostalgia, wonder. I mean, if it's our favorite sport or our favorite team or our favorite museum, it's like, we kind of feel the moment. And there's that sense of wonder, that sense of nostalgia, sentiment about whoever these people are. And then we've all been created with this innate ability to, in that moment, also say, well, if C-3PO can do it, then I can do it, right? This thing of, well, if these people accomplished this, then maybe I can too. That seems to be the picture of what we have here in Hebrews 12 and following up from chapter 11. This picture of Christians who have gone on before us and their faith encouraging us remembering those people. Who are those people in your life? Who's that parent, that grandparent, that person that you knew in church growing up, or maybe you didn't grow up in church, that person who as an adult helped you find God? We have those people that are in our own hall of faith, so to speak. Those people that there was something about their lives that we said, you know, their love for Jesus, I want to follow. And we watch them, even through moments of discouragement, they kept their faith. This seems to be the picture of what we have here. That we are remembering the great men and women of old, the great men and women in our own life, who through the middle of discouragement and weariness, they kept their faith in God. They kept looking to God. Now, here in Hebrews 12, verse 1, is this a picture of believers looking down on us from heaven and cheering us on? Probably not. There is some encouragement from the book of Revelation when it comes to the idea of looking down, though. Revelation 21, verse 4. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning, any crying, or pain. The first things have passed away. No mourning, no grief, no crying, no pain, no more. And yet the reality is, if someone were looking down, it would only take about 3 milliseconds to have something to mourn or grieve, for tears or pain to be created. Bless, if my Father had to look down from heaven and see that there may still be something wrong with the septic tank, I don't think that's heaven anymore. So what is happening here in this moment? Well, as we said, over the course of, maybe 4,000 years, we have all of these believers. At the very least, millions and millions of people who have believed in and followed after the one true God. And some of those people were desperately discouraged. Some of them because their countries were invaded, taken over, conquered, and they were left in a war-torn mess. Those things still happen today. People over 4,000 years that experience the kind of desperate discouragement that we face. People who experienced an impossible spouse, overbearing parents, a rebellious child. People who experience difficulty with their finances. Their health failed. Their minds faded. Their hearts were broken. Their souls were dying. In other words, for 4,000 years, people have experienced some of the same discouragements that we've experienced. There's nothing new under the sun. No matter who your favorite political pundit is, no matter how many times they say, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to America, that will always be a lie. Because the worst thing that has ever happened to America is always happening to America, and it is sin. And the only cure for sin is not who we elect next. It is the one who sits on the throne forever. So there's nothing new under the sun. There is only the confidence we have that Jesus reigns. And that'll never stop. So even though our discouragement may feel like the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of the world, and let's be honest, it does. When we are desperately discouraged, we think no one has ever experienced this before. But that's not true. It's just that it has a different name maybe than it did 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Being desperately discouraged in many ways is a frequent part of human existence. And there have always been people who were desperately discouraged and they still loved and followed God. Everything in their life just completely fell apart and they kept loving and following God. Why? Because they knew that He is the beginning and the end, and nobody else is. They knew when they looked at the very character of who God is that their lasting hope was only going to be in Him. That He is the only one who is holy, holy, holy. He is the only one that one day a song, many songs will be sung about Him. And those songs will sound like this. Revelation 7:10. Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Blessing, glory, wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, power, and might belong to our God forever and ever. Amen. And the song will never end. There is no president, there is no politician, there is no king, there is no queen, there is no dictator, there is no CEO, there is no inventor, there is no pastor, there is no educator, there is no actor, there is no athlete. There is no person that gets that song, no person that will ever get that song. It is for God and God alone. And since that God is the only God who can be worshiped that way, since that God has been worshiped by at least millions and millions, since that God has proved Himself over and over and over again for at least the last 4,000 years of people paying attention to His greatness, and because that God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to satisfy the penalty of sin by being crucified to death on a cross outside of Jerusalem one Friday afternoon, and then raised by the power of God to never die again. And since what He accomplished for people like me and people like you is the only way for our souls to be saved and satisfied, since all of that is true, and since for at least 4,000 years, people have been clinging to that truth, finding confidence in that truth, having their hope renewed in that truth. Since all of this is true, therefore, what should we do? Verse 1. Let's rid ourselves of every obstacle and the sin which so easily entangles us. Are you overwhelmed with discouragement this morning? Is there just some deep discouragement just seemingly taking over your life? Does it feel like everything is crashing in on you? Do you have like 78 things happening in your life right now that are completely out of your control, but they seem to be creating so much discouragement? What can you do? Well, let me quickly jump ahead for just a moment to verse 2, which we'll unpack, Lord willing, a little more next week, and just kind of get the theme of this whole series in your minds. Hebrews 12:2, looking only at Jesus. Looking only at Jesus. Looking first and most at Jesus. When the discouragement feels like it is things that are completely out of your control, what can you do? Look at Jesus. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis said this: "It is when I turn to Christ, when I give up myself to His personality, then I first begin to have a real personality of my own. Are you a middle schooler, a child, a middle adult, a senior adult who's still trying to find yourself? Trying to figure out who you are? Lewis had moments just like that too. And he said, it was only when I began to dial in to the person and personality of Jesus that I began to find myself. He goes on, there are no real personalities anywhere else. Until you have given yourself to him, you will not have a real self. And then he goes on, look for yourself, and you will find in that long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. That doesn't sound like good news. But then he says this, but look for Christ, and you will find him, which is amazing, as we sang. Even if you don't believe that or you think that sounds crazy, there is nothing more amazing in the universe than finding Christ and being found by Christ. But look for Christ and you will find him, and with him, everything else. If there are 78 things happening in your life right now that feel like they are out of your control and they are creating nothing but discouragement, what can you do? Look to Jesus. Look at Jesus. Look at who he is. Look at his character, his nature. Look at what he did in history, not fairy tales, but what he did in history. Look at what he has done. Look at what he has promised to do. Look at what he is doing. Look at what he's going to do. Look at the character and the person of Jesus, because in Jesus Christ, you will actually discover what your heart longs for the most. Our favorite food, our favorite person, our favorite team, our favorite vacation, our favorite whatever in this life, they're all fine, but they will not satisfy you. Ultimate self, ultimate personality, ultimate hope, ultimate satisfaction, ultimate salvation can only be found in Jesus. So if you're overwhelmed with things that are out of your control, then look at Jesus. But let's say it's not 78 things that are out of control. Let's say there's something else that's creating the discouragement. What could it be? Well, the letter of the Hebrews says that it could be one of two things: obstacles or sin. What kind of obstacles? Well, it could be absolutely anything. Think about an Olympic athlete. Would an Olympic swimmer, when they're trying to win a gold medal, wear a Grinch costume in the pool? No, they wouldn't. You know what I'm talking about, right? The onesie, the onesie Grinch costume that, kind of zips up the front, and it's got the little hood that comes over the back, and, that's the outfit. Would an Olympic swimmer wear that in the pool? No. Because it's sin? No. Because it's an obstacle. It's not something that would help them win. It would slow them down. So they wear high-tech bathing suits and high-tech shower caps so that they can glide through the water as fast as they can. What are some of the obstacles in your life that may be creating discouragement? How can you get rid of them without sinning? Because, see, we may look at our spouse or our kids or our job at our school, here's an obstacle. But how can you get rid of an obstacle without sinning? You can't just say, well, I think this is an obstacle, so I'm going to get rid of it. Now, how can you get rid of obstacles without sinning? What are some obstacles you could start working on right now? It might be that fourth donut, right? It could be. Could be the fourth one or the sixth one, whichever one applies. It could be, some of those 78 subscriptions that you have, on your apps for, movies, TV, razor blades, soap, whatever you're subscribed to, this constantly. Maybe you can dial that back a little bit. Maybe staying up till 2:30 in the morning every night, eating boiled peanuts out of a can and watching old black and white episodes of Twilight Zone. Maybe that could be an obstacle to you getting up the next morning and doing what you need to do. An obstacle can be anything that would distract us from looking at Jesus. It's not sinful, it's just an obstacle. Something that keeps us from trying to keep our faith in the middle of discouragement. So don't freak out, but maybe this week, look around. Just look around at your life. You don't have to look for 78 things, just find one. Just see if there's one obstacle this week that's slowing you down and keeping you from looking at Jesus. The other thing that could be creating weariness and discouragement is sin. What kind of sin? Your kind of sin. Well, what's your kind of sin? Well, it's your sin. See, the picture here is the sin that so easily entangles you may not be the sin that easily entangles me. It's not that your sin is unique, but in a sense, it's unique to you. It's your sin. It's the sin that's slowing you down. It's the sin that you need to get rid of. But sometimes we're not real quick to mark out our own sins, right? Think of it this way. Imagine old Bobby Sue Ann Edwards, and every day she gets on the phone with old Myra Sprague, and she says, you know what? She said, I hear that every day old Cyrus Tankersley, he goes over to the Boar's Nest at 10 o'clock in the morning, stays there all day having beverages and bratwurst with Malcolm Meriwether, and at the end of the day, Penny's got to come and take him home. And then Cyrus is sitting over at the Boar's Nest, and he's like, you know what? I tell you, what I hear about old Bobby Sue Ann Edwards is every day, 10 o'clock, she starts watching her stories, her soap operas, and then she spends the rest of the day on the phone with Myra Jean, telling her about everything and all the gossip going all over town. And then Jimmy has to come home and hide her phone so that she'll pay attention to him and the kids. Which sin do you need to get rid of? See, we all have sin. There is sin somewhere in our lives. So it would be really easy for me to say, hey, let me give you a list of sins. And then you can check off, what is and what isn't in your life. But see, what that does is it creates pride. So we ain't going to make a list. Because we might say, oh, I don't have that one, so I must be pretty good. I think I'm fine. So we're going to take another angle. More than 300 years ago, Thomas Watson wrote an article, a devotional article about what it means to find your unique sin, what your unique sin is, and let's just say in this moment, so to speak. And it's a very good devotional. I've super briefed it in just a few phrases that go like this. So what is the sin that so easily entangles you? What's the sin that so easily entangles me? So let's do the math for ourselves here. Here's the list. It's the sin that we do not want to be accused of. Second, it's the sin that we think about the most. Third, the sin that has the most power over us. Fourth, the sin that we defend the most. And fifth, the sin that we have the most difficult time giving up. So what is the sin that so easily entangles you? If you're looking for some simple math to try to filter into it, listen to it again. The sin we do not want to be accused of, the sin that we think about the most, the sin that has the most power over us, the sin that we defend the most, and the sin we have the most difficult time giving up. What's yours? I've done that a few times this week, so I got my math figured out. But take that list. What is that sin that has you so tangled up? That sin that's creating discouragement for you, and even if you don't know it, is probably creating discouragement for the people around you. What sin is so easily entangling you? And why do you need to get rid of it? What's the big deal? Verse 1, the last part. And let's run with endurance the race that is set before us. You may have heard the story of John Anquari. In 1968, he was an Olympic runner for the country of Tanzania in East Africa. And in his Olympic marathon race, in an early part of the race, he was injured pretty severely, dislocated shoulder, huge gash on his leg. They patched up his leg a little bit, and he kept running. He finished an hour after the winner. And when they talked to him afterwards, this is what he said. My country did not send me 5,000 miles away to start the race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish it. Following Jesus Christ, being a Christian, is not a Sunday ride on a pontoon boat at Lake Sanctuary. To follow after Jesus Christ, to be a Christian, is active endurance, not passive entertainment. To follow after Jesus Christ means that you are fully engaged. You're in a race and you're enduring the race. Sometimes we hear that word endure and we go, oh, you got to grin and bear it. No, that's not what it is. You need to grin and bear hug it. You need to grab it with everything that you have. You need to embrace the action of your faith. You need to embrace the race. But sometimes we don't want to do that, do we? Some people never even start, right? They may pray a sinner's prayer, they may get baptized, they may join the church, and then you won't see them again until Easter or Christmas, if that. Some people actually never begin the race. They never embrace the race. And then there's others of us that sometimes we just don't want to run. We're tired. I was looking for a particular quote that I had seen a couple of months ago, and I couldn't find it, but in searching for it, I came across an article, and this was the title of the article. Lord, let me die, mercy for those tired of living. That's a title that says, I'm tired of running. And what Greg Morse did in that article is he laid out how some of the exact same people from chapter 11 in Hebrews in the Hall of Faith, some of those same people had those same exact moments where they were so desperately discouraged they didn't want to run anymore. And they told God, I'm tired of running. And what happened? What happened was they again saw the character and the nature of God. They saw the love of God that has been displayed over and over again in so many different ways, especially and particularly in the person of Jesus Christ. And they kept looking up. And they kept focusing on the glory of God. Greg Morse put it like this. When we look at their lives, the challenge is this. Continue believing. Continue trusting. This dark night is preparing for you an eternal weight of glory. And then he said this. Scars will do more than heal there. I don't really fully know what he means. And he didn't expand. But when I read that sentence, it grabbed me. Scars will do more than heal there. I don't know what that means. I just know that in Christ, my scars and your scars will not just heal there. In some sense, they will be no more. No more mourning. No more crying. No more pain. No more death. Only in Jesus, but fully in Jesus, completely in Jesus, and definitely in Jesus. And that's why we keep looking to Jesus. And that's why we keep running, and we keep running, and we keep running. Let's run. Let's run.